Larry Campbell and Jamie Donatuto, would you come up and join us, please? They are both from Swinomish, and they're going to share with you their work there at home, which is just amazing, and we're very honored and pleased to have them with us today.
Good morning, everyone. What a wonderful day, and I just love the food that we've been able to partake in here today, so I think that is a good thing to talk about, is our traditional foods. And where we come from in the state of Washington, we're 75 miles north of Seattle, and we have the opportunity to be saltwater tribal people in freshwater and mountains not too far away from us. So we have great diversity in just a small area where we grow up. So our traditional foods are very important to us, and today we're going to describe the work that Jamie and I have been doing for some time to be able to, again, find a reason to preserve these foods. And I'll give you Jamie.
Thanks, Larry. I just wanted to say thank you for the conference organizers for inviting us to speak today. We're really excited to be here and share our work, and thank you to Shakopee for organizing and sponsoring this conference. It's been an amazing conference so far. This is Larry Campbell. He's a traditional speaker as Swinomish. He's been working for his own tribal government for over 35 years. He's an expert in cultural resources and government liaison, and well-versed in just about everything. His traditional name is Wanasia. And my name is Jamie Donatuto, and I've been with the tribe for 17 years, and I've had the pleasure of working with Larry for those last 17 years. What we want to do to give you a bit of background about where we're from and the Pacific Northwest is show a short video where we went around to different tribes in our region and asked them two questions. The first question was, what kind of climate change impacts are you currently seeing on your traditional foods and resources? And the second question was, and what are you doing about it? So if we could show that short video, we'd appreciate that.
This video highlights voices of Pacific Northwest coastal Indigenous peoples. These are a few of the many who are actively addressing climate change. Their words showcase the breadth and depth of climate change knowledge that Indigenous peoples hold. Their work demonstrates the lead role of Indigenous peoples in climate change assessments and action planning, and provides a greater understanding of the issues facing Native peoples today. Each narrative addresses personal views about climate change, the biggest concerns, current and future actions to address climate impacts.
About climate change and how that's affecting our first foods like harvestable plants, our first foods like shellfish and salmon. These are all things that are impacted by climate change, and these are reasons why Native communities or all Indigenous communities are impacted more than other communities by climate change.
There's a domino effect, just the oceans being affected, and that impacts basically everything else. And my main concern is a food source, so looking at the environment as a food source. And so if these sources are being impacted, then the health of these communities are directly being impacted. So if they don't have access to nutritional foods, then there's no way that they'll be able to sustain themselves for, generations to come.
Talk to another family that maybe lives on this part of the coast, another one lives on the river. They're experiencing perhaps the same climatic change or phenomena at a broad scale, but each of them at a local level are experiencing things slightly different.
But I think it's real. I think that it's happening. It's going to accelerate, and we have to begin some sort of planning process to figure out what we can do.
What we saw in this last year, the wildfires, the droughts, the severity of the storms that has continued to plague this nation, and it seems to verify what a lot of scientists were already telling us.
One of the things that
I am doing is I'm serving on a local community advisory board with the University of Washington for the Center for Ecogenetics and Environmental Health as an advisory board member with the tribal perspective to be able to help in future research, to be able to bring in that perspective of the values that we have as tribal people, which is we versus I.
You know, we're taught the S'Klallam way, and the S'Klallam way is to love yourself, love other people, and love every living thing that dwells on this earth. And if we could teach our kids and use this as an educational tool, that'll change the way that people are impacting our climate.
You know, there's a saying in my community, when the tide is out, the table is set. And that means a lot to my community, to be able to not have to go to a store to gather resources to provide for their families in need.
One of the projects that I've been blessed to be able to work on with the University of Washington and the Together for Children families is the book Tatawasna. And this started as a result of what is important to our tribe and to our community around the environment, what's affecting us. And based on all the community conversations that we had in the gatherings, we had decided that we would put together a children's book from our families to our children to be able to say, this is the S'Klallam way of life. This is our wish, our hope, our dream for you, that you will continue the sacred responsibility to uphold and respect the earth, each other, and the traditions that we have.
That's a short demonstration of our work, and a lot of the work between what Jamie and I started 17 years ago was a story that I told her about this area here that you saw where we had our clam bake. Many years ago, one of our grandmothers told me and my best friend, that was his grandmother, said that it's time to go get mussels. So we went out to Whidbey Island. We got the mussels. We brought them back to the beach. We started up a fire, and we steamed them, got them ready. And when we were done, when they were all ready to eat, then we let the community come down and partake in the mussels. We got enough for our whole community. So a lot of them come down, and we're eating. And my best friend's mother, I saw her sitting on the little chair there, eating really, really fast. And then every now and then I'd see her reach into her purse, take out a pill, and was popping it into her mouth. And I asked my friend, I says, why is your mother eating so fast? He says, I don't know, go ask her. So when I went and asked her, she said that, well, I'm allergic to mussels. I'm allergic to the seafood. So that's why I'm taking Benadryl. And she was eating Benadryl like candy. And so I said that if it's going to make you sick, why are you eating it? And she says, because my spirit demands it. So in our neck of the woods, and I imagine a lot of the other tribes are like that, our salmon, our clams, our crab, our deer, our elk, all the things that we consider our traditional foods, they're spirit food also. At 32 years of age when that happened, I didn't understand what she was telling me. But when I got about 50, then I really began to understand. My spirit and my body really started to crave these type of foods. And that's when we began to realize that these foods were also, they not only provided nutritional and they tasted good, but they were a necessary part of good health in our tribal communities. So the doctors would always tell us that the more salmon that you eat, is better for your heart than it is the other types of foods. So again, we know that. We've understood that. And plus the idea of getting clams, crabs, salmon. It's all very hard work, so you also get the exercise into it. So my doctor tells me I got to lose weight and I got to lose 20 pounds and I need to exercise. And most of us in our tribal communities, we worked hard all of our lives. So exercise is kind of a dirty word that we don't like to follow. It's kind of against our religion. But again, the foods taste. They provide something that is indescribable. I guess that you can't really describe it, but it does make you healthy. And in our community, before we do anything, we have any governmental event, we have ceremonial event, we have spiritual event, or we have family celebrations. It all starts out with the food. It all starts out with the food. Remember one time we had a funeral in our community, and one of the elders from neighboring communities asked me, "Who's cooking the fish today?" And I said, "I'm sorry, but we don't have fish today." And he said, "What's wrong with you people, Swinomish people? You always got to have fish at this time." And after that, I mentioned that to our tribal chairman, and hey, we made sure that we had fish after that, because again, that's what the elders from your tribal community, from the other tribal communities who come to visit you for whatever reason, that's what they're looking for. So 25 years ago, a lot of our elders began to tell us that we know where all the traditional foods, we know where all the traditional medicines are at, but when we go back there to look for them, they're gone. And again, I was young at the time when they told me that, and I thought they were just giving me an observation, sharing that with me, but I didn't realize till about 15 years later that they were telling me, "Look into it, will you? Try to figure out where they're at and why they're gone. Did they move to another area? Are they extinct? Who knows?" And so when I told the story to Jamie when she started doing the work for the tribe, she took that as the lead to begin our work and developing the Indigenous health indicators. And one way that our tribal community determines health for itself. So for this, I'll give that part to Jamie.
Thanks, Larry. Larry mentioned the Indigenous health indicators, and we're going to get to that in just a second. I just wanted to give a brief overview. I don't know if you could hear the video. Up here, we couldn't hear the sound very well. But a lot of the images that you saw were what Larry described, which is essentially people harvesting shellfish. You dig a pit in the sand, and you build a fire over hot rocks, and then you're able to use those hot rocks to then steam the shellfish with wet burlap sacks over it. And then you saw some images of the entire community coming together and eating together. And this was fairly common practice. And I'm mentioning this now because it will be a repeating theme throughout this presentation. And there were lots of images of a particular area at Swinomish called Lone Tree Point, which is where those clam bakes happened and still continue to happen today. And that's a particular area on the reservation that's really important because it's the #1 shellfish harvesting area on the reservation, and it's what we'll be talking about within this talk as well. I wanted to give you a bit of background in general about climate change at Swinomish. In 2007, the Swinomish Senate, which is the governing body of the tribe, signed a proclamation that said that they weren't going to argue about climate change. Climate change was real, climate change was happening, and we were going to do something about it. And so they directed us as staff to go out and figure out what the potential impacts would be, and then to create an action plan. And so what you see are the 2 documents that we created in 2009 and 2010, and this was all of the departments working together. So in 2009, the technical report is an impact assessment. It focuses fairly heavily on the built infrastructure, so there's a lot about the buildings and the roads and energy and just what the changes are going to be over the next 50 to 100 years. There's a lot about natural resources in there as well. But there's one piece that's missing, and that piece is health, and the way that Swinomish thinks about health, and that health is based, as many people have said here, on the land and the culture and the foods and resources. And so that was where Larry and I were really trying to work together to create something that we could put that would make sense both to the community and to people outside of the community who would be reading this document. And so that's what we're currently working on and what we're going to present to you today. I put this up here. It's pretty complicated, and the text is small, but essentially what it's doing is outlining each of the different factors that was assessed in the impact assessment and then talked about in the action plan. So this particular one is looking at natural systems. Water resources are highlighted, so it looks at freshwater, groundwater, and the wetlands. It's pretty technical in the way that it was done, but what I'm putting it up here today to point out was that it's using a really simple color-coded scale to show what the potential impacts would be from low to high. And that's the part that I want you to keep in mind as we go forward, because you can talk about all kinds of things like impacts to roads or impacts to wetlands or impacts to particular traditional foods based on a scaled system of low to high. And it's a pretty intuitive way that makes sense to a lot of people. And so that's really what Larry and I base our work on when we talk about indicators and assessing indicators. So Larry mentioned that he and I worked together for many years to develop a set of Indigenous health indicators. We did this because one of the first projects I had at the tribe was to look at bioaccumulative toxics in the shellfish on and around the reservation. And I came in as a toxicology student. I was really excited about this project. We took samples all around the area. I did the basic toxicological analysis, which is whatever your dose is, whatever the amount you eat is your potential risk. And I remember presenting the results to the Swinomish Senate, and there was this silence, and I thought, crap, I did something wrong. And then the chairman looked at me and he said, this is fine, but this is not how we define health. You need to go back to the drawing board. You're just telling us about physical health impacts, our risks from eating shellfish, but you're missing this whole other part about what health and first foods and resources mean to us. And it was kind of a light bulb in my head, but it didn't really turn on until Larry was like, hey, come here. I need to really explain this to you. And after that, we spent several years interviewing over 100 community members about what health is and about what it means and what the important aspects are. And these 6 particular indicators that you see up here are the aspects of health that we thought were missing from any kind of health assessment that we saw that was out there, that was being used by agencies and academia. And these are specific to Swinomish, and we're very clear about that. And you'll see 3 levels. So the top level is Lushut seed, and it's the meaning of the entire aspect of that indicator. So for instance, for the top one, the English way to describe it is self-determination, but we don't really we use that word when we're talking to folks outside of the community, but when we're talking to community members, what we're really talking about is the community's own ability to create healing and restoration programs and development programs instead of having outside folks do it. And then the levels of trust between the government and the community. And that's really how we're defining self-determination. So what you're seeing is Lushut seed on top, the words that we use to describe it when we're talking to, for instance, EPA or National Institutes of Health. And then the words underneath are the words that the community was telling us that were most important to them. And what you're seeing here is a depiction of essentially a clam bake. So it's an intergenerational gathering. I mean, elders are sitting there and telling stories. The youth are gathering shellfish. People are digging pits. They're making the fire. You also see beach seining, where you stand on the beach and you walk the net out as the salmon come by and collect the salmon. And these are all different things that happen on Lone Tree Point. So just to give you an idea of the natural resources base at Swinomish. So when we started to think about, we had developed the indicators and we wanted to think about what the potential impacts to the first foods and resources would be using these indicators. And so what this particular slide is showing you that we wanted to look at the change in the habitat of 3 important first foods to Swinomish. So clams, salmon, and crabs. And we wanted to think about that in sea level rise and storm surge. Swinomish is a low-lying reservation, 90% surrounded by water. We're just north of the mouth of the mighty Skagit River, where there's 6 species of salmon. We're the only place in the lower 48 that even has that. But we're very much impacted by sea level rise and storm surge. And so we wanted to know, we worked with physical scientists within the tribe, and we wanted to know what's going to happen in 6 different areas on the reservation, including Lone Tree Point, in the next 50 to 100 years, and how that would impact the habitat of these first foods. And then what we did was we took the information that those scientists gave us and we brought it out into the community. And we asked them, what is this going to do to health in the way that you define it? Because this is the information that needs to go into the impact assessment and the action plan, what the community really feels are the most important impacts and how to move forward. So this is just a picture, another picture of the reservation and the 6 study sites that we looked at. You'll see one called Lone Tree Point. It's kind of in the middle, and that's one of the ones that we'll be focusing on today. So the image that you see, the multicolored image on the left, is a model of storm surge that the physical scientists put together for us, thinking about when storms are coming up through the Skagit Bay and hitting the reservation, and you see the little red diamond, that's Lone Tree Point. How are those changing over time? How are those storms getting bigger? We knew they were getting bigger. We were seeing more inundation into some of the homes on the outlying coasts and the important fishing areas, but we wanted to know what it was going to look like into the future. So they created a ton of really cool maps for us, and then they interpreted them for us. Because if you're anything like me, I looked at this and I was like, it's pretty. Can you explain it to me? Because I need to be able to explain it to a lot of other people. So they worked with us, and they were really great about that, and I'll show you what it turned into. But the picture on the right is really significant for many reasons. The one on the left is modeling a storm that occurred in the summer of 2015 in August. If you know anything about the Pacific Northwest, storms in the summer are fairly unusual. It's also the most important time to be out on the land and harvesting shellfish and beach seining. And so everybody had all their beach seining equipment out on Lone Tree Point, which is normally a sandy beach, but what you see in this picture is it's completely inundated by water. There was no rain. We just had a high tide and a really low pressure system, and the waves did something that we had never seen before, and it destroyed thousands of dollars worth of fishing equipment. I mean, people came back in the morning and were horrified to see what had happened. And it was one of the many wake-up calls that we've been having about the real changes that are going on right now and how that's impacting the tribe. So working with the physical scientists, it took us a long time, but these are kind of some of the maps that we developed and we brought out into the community. So this is Lone Tree Point from an aerial view. What you'll see is essentially it's sand with an estuary behind it and one lone tree out in the front, which is why it's called Lone Tree Point. And this is what it looks like at normal high tide. So you can see that normally it's not completely inundated. Those are really important. Like I said, clam beaches all around. That's where people go clam digging. There's great crab habitat. And importantly, as you may know, salmon are, some of them are endangered species, some are on the threatened list. When they come out of the Skagit River, that estuary is one of the first places that they can hide. The baby salmon can hide before they go out to the ocean from the bigger predators. So little estuaries like this are super important for salmon to survive. But what the scientists were telling us is that the waves are going to basically top Lone Tree Point within the next 50 years, and the estuary is going to completely disappear. So the clam beaches will be gone, the crab habitat will change, and that salmon estuary where all the salmon hide will also be gone. And so what they did was they ranked it on a color-coded scale of low impacts to high impacts, and we did this for all 6 areas that we studied. And what they said was essentially the salmon are going to be really highly impacted, and the clams and the crab are going to have medium-high impacts because they can migrate up the beach slowly, but it's possible. But what you'll see on this is that there are no low or medium impacts. Every single area that we looked at is going to be fairly heavily impacted. So we took these types of pictures out into the community and we said, based on this, tell us, you gave us your definition of health, we put it into the Indigenous Health indicators, help us with the 6 Indigenous indicators of health. Which ones will be most highly impacted in each of these areas, and which ones should the government focus on first? And it's hard, right? Everyone says it's really, really hard. Those are all really important impacts of health. But what we found was that within the different communities at Swinomish, each one is connected to a different area and each one holds a different knowledge. And so we got different results from the different areas. People ranked this one very differently than they would rank, say, Martha's Beach, our Turner's Bay, and that gave us the information that we needed to then move forward to make action plans. So this is just a quick example of some of what the results might look like. So this one we talked about community connection. So if you remember back to the first slide, community connection is really about the sharing of the resources, whether everybody's able to get together, everyone has an important role that they play, whether they're fishers or they're cooks or they're table managers, but they have a different role in the community and it's respected. And so we said into 2 different areas, one's Turner's Bay and one's Snoosh Beach, how might what we showed you in terms of sea level rise and storm surge and impacts to these first foods, how might that impact community connection? And people voted based on their own traditional knowledge of those particular areas and what currently happens there today. And you'll see, for instance, for Turner's Bay, they didn't say there was going to be a super high impact for the most part. But then when we started talking about Snoosh, yes, there was. And so what we realized was that you really could kind of piece together where the priorities were going to be. And we used a variety of methods. I mean, the pigeonhole, we used wireless polling clickers, which people really loved because they could sit in a room full of all of their aunties and uncles, but be able to vote anonymously. So they wouldn't have to be able to voice an opinion that might potentially be different from an elder's, but then the results shot up on the screen immediately. And that really started the stories. And then we were able to listen to the stories to help inform our work, but not have to share those stories with outside government agencies. All we needed to share with them were the numbers. So that was really helpful because it protected the knowledge that was there sitting in the room. So I just put this slide up again because it's a recap of the Indigenous Health Indicators for Swinomish. And Larry and I worked with many tribes and helped them create Indigenous Health Indicators for their own use and context, whether it be about pollution in Alaska from the potential mine up there, the Pebble mine, or whether it's to think about priorities of health, to develop a health department, many different reasons. And they look different. Some have 4, some have 7. But the important part is that they come from the community. But I want you to take a minute and open up Pigeonhole if you have it, because new technology both scares me and fascinates me. So I'm going to ask you all to participate in a poll with Pigeonhole if you have it on your phones. And if you look at the sessions, you'll see the session with Larry and I, and then underneath it, it says Jamie's poll. And if you open that up, you'll see these 6 names. And what I want you to do is think about your own community and think about a really important area for you. And think about whatever climate context might be there and what potentially might be impacting it. And then just whatever comes to your gut first, whatever comes to your heart first, pick one of those that you think would be the most important thing to focus on first. They're all important and we realize that, but pick the one that you think would be the most important to focus on first. And what's fascinating to me is that when we first started doing this, people said, everyone's going to pick the same one, but they don't. Everybody's voting with their own hearts and their own guts and their own knowledge. And this is really the important piece to bring to the table when developing impact assessments and action plans, because it's the whole community that feeds into that, then is the information that we give to the Swinomish government for decision making. So I appreciate the fact that people are using Pigeonhole. Thank you. And you can see the results up on screen, and it's really fascinating. And, you know, I recognize that these Indigenous health indicators may not reflect what your community would necessarily think, but thank you for being creative and voting. So I think it's interesting just to look at this and see what the spread is like. And it's true, natural resource security definitely comes up very high for most of what we talked about too, but not with all of them. And I'm going to do something a little bit unusual. Thank you. I'm going to invite, we have a whole bunch, our whole crew up here with us. And so I'm going to invite them all onto the stage because it takes a whole bunch of people to put this together. I hope we got 2 minutes.
Just a little bit of explanation. You see the English version of our Indigenous health indicators. A lot of these concepts don't translate from the Indian language to English very well, so those are still concepts that from the English language that we're still working on and still trying to find a better concept that would describe that. So again, that's work in progress, and as we took these indicators out to different tribes, they were allowed to look at them and to work with them and to develop their own indicators. And I have to tell you that when we started doing this, the most important part of it was that we allowed the community to determine what the research question was instead of letting the scientists do whatever interests them. So again, that when our community sees us, the people that we interviewed, when they see us, they ask us how the work is done because they have an investment into the work. So thank you.
We're running out of time. I just want everyone to introduce themselves really quickly so that you get an idea of who they are. We're really pleased to work with all of them. And the last slide, this is one of the things that came out of this was that education was super important, and everyone talked about actually positive. When we started talking about climate change in the community, people were like, no, education isn't going to be impacted. This is positive. You're talking about it now. And we were like, right. So we used the 13 Moons curriculum, which is a curriculum that we developed, and these ladies are going to give you like a 30-second overview of. But we used the traditional Swinomish harvest wheel to think about how the seasons guide the people in their harvest, and we created a curriculum. And this will be our last slide, but I would like to let these ladies introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Mike Height. I'm the Community Environmental Health Program Coordinator. Do workshops based on the 13 Moons curriculum with elders and youth.
Good morning. My name is Phoebe Cariety. I'm from the Navajo Nation as well as the Sleta and Santa Ana Pueblo. I've been living in Bellingham, Washington for the last 3 years, and I just graduated from Northwest Indian College with my AA. And I'll be transferring to Western Washington University to finish my bachelor's in community health and environmental science with an emphasis on toxicology. What I do over there is just I'm the intern, and I assist Mike, Jamie, and Larry, as well as taking the reins from Sunny and learning a lot about the Pacific Northwest and especially plants and just the abundance that, you can go out and pick blackberries, and that's something you can't do in the Southwest. So thank you.
I'm Beth Willip, and I am a Swinomish tribal member. I've been working with the program for the last 2 years on our food sovereignty assessment, and I just graduated from Northwest Indian College also. Thank you. And I'm working with Swinomish and Northwest Indian College, the students at both the high school and the college for native plants and food sovereignty. Thanks.
Good morning. I'm a little horse from our travels. My name is Sunny Tadlock. My gifted name is Inkuhulau. I'm a direct descendant of the Okanagan Band of the Colville Confederated Tribe in Washington State. I am the 13 Moons Curriculum Program Coordinator. I've been working with the program for about 2 years now. And this slide here is something that we developed with the 13 Moons Curriculum. This is one activity that we do at the community clam bake that you saw in the video and throughout the presentation. This was during last year's clam bake. It was the 10th year anniversary. We decided to do a science activity before the community clam bake. And we were able to have guests from NOAA and some other local organizations to come out to do some science on the beach with the kids. And so they were able to do some shellfish toxin testing right there on the beach. We brought them all down to the beach. We gave them a little lab coat, and I told them, these lab coats are boring. Like, what do you think we should do? Should we kind of add our own flair to them? And so we got to color them, and we got to indigenize them. So we have a 13 Moons coloring book, and so they got to use that as a stencil and put that on their lab coat. So they got to put some Coast Salish art on this white, boring lab coat that they see male scientists wearing, and they got to put themselves in those shoes and do science on the beaches that these government officials are doing to test their traditional foods. And so it was really important for them to see that science experiment that was going on and then be able to go into the community at the clam bake and eat those traditional foods with their community members and their families. And a couple of, at the beginning, I asked them, what does a scientist look like? And they said, well, he wears a white coat. He has a beard. He has crazy hair. And one girl goes, or she. And I was like, yes, you are right. And at the end of the day, I said, okay, now what does a scientist look like? And every single one, they said, me, I'm a scientist. I said, yes, that's exactly right. I'm very happy to be able to be a part of this project and this community. They've been very open to me. As an environmental educator, I'm not Swinomish. These are not my teachings or my, specific natural resources. And so for me being an educator, I'm just creating a space for these teachings to take place and be able to have these stories come out during these workshops and during these science activities. And I feel very honored and humbled to be able to do that. And I'm very honored and humbled to be here with you guys today. And I just want to thank my team for very supporting me. I'm starting a graduate program at the University of Washington, so my time with them is a little bit limited now, but I'm very happy to be here, so thank you.
Thank you. We have a wonderful team here. You can see I'm the only guy out of the bunch, so I'm the elder, but it's not a democracy. Again, we want to thank the organizers for this wonderful gathering that you've had here today. This is different from most of the presentations that we do. We give this to a lot of federal and state agencies and other tribes, but it's really nice being able to give this to people who are actually working on the ground in our traditional foods and our traditional medicines. So thank you for this opportunity for us to come here to brag about our work. Hi, Chickasaw.